George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
All is changed utterly. A terrible ugliness is born. And Iraq is next for the shaving. 11,000 takfiri fanatics will soon be headed across the border to liberate Iraq, with the same, no doubt, warm round of applause from Western capitals and their media lapdogs. But hey, Saudi Arabia has won the World Cup 2034. Sing hallelujah. The Christmas celebrations in Syria have been officially banned. Even Santa Claus may not raise his ugly head in anyone's window. Massacres of religious minorities have become the daily reality for the plural society that used to be Syria. The Arab world is now dead to me. The Syrian Arab Republic was its last castle. There is nothing left. As Rumi said, you can beat 40 scholars with a single fact, but you cannot beat an idiot with 40 facts. There'll be many more than 40 in the course of tonight's mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. I'll be right there.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Syria is no more, really. Israel occupies 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip of Syrian territory in just 2 days. And frankly, they can go as far and wide as they want. Nobody is opposing them. Nobody can oppose them. Any means of opposing them have been destroyed with the active complicity of those now in charge in Damascus. In fact, those now in charge in Damascus will not even utter a word of condemnation about Israel's seizure of their land. In fact, the new Che Guevara that is in power in Damascus has said categorically that his country is no longer an enemy of Israel, that his country will not fight a war with Israel. So Netanyahu can go as far as he likes, and he might go all the way. Why not? Now that all the Arab states are completely disarmed, now that the Syrian Arab Republic is no more, they don't have an air force, they don't have a navy. Israel has destroyed both of them in the last 48 hours. They don't have an army, they have an armed group of fanatic terrorists, of variety of plethora of different organizations, some of whom have even begun fighting among themselves already, and definitely will be within days, weeks, or at the maximum months from now. The takfiri fanatics are crushing the Kurdish fighters in their enclave in Syria. They may find it a tougher nut to crack than the Syrian Arab army was in the end. These Kurdish groups are militarily, very experienced, very well armed, and crucially, have the support of the United States. So we now have an intra-NATO conflict going on in the north of Syria between Turkey and US-backed Kurdish opposition groups. But in the rest, in the rest of the country, things look black indeed. The black flags of ISIS and Al-Qaeda hang everywhere, are being paraded everywhere. The makeover that CNN excuse me, and CNN and the New York Times tried to give them has been just as quickly washed away. Beheadings have begun. The murder of people for no other reason than their religious affiliation has begun. Social media is filled with videos too lurid for me to recommend that you watch. And you'll never see them in the mainstream media because they're filled with the horrors, real and alleged, real and false, of the outgoing regime. And they have no interest in showing you what it is that they have just encouraged into power. But this Syria story is not just a local story, and certainly not for me, who have spent all their lives, people like me, supporting the idea of an Arab nation of all kinds of religions, and none stretching from Marrakesh all the way to Bahrain, 350 million people with a common language, with a common culture, believing in one single God. What a power, I always argued, it could be. But that idea is dead now. It may come back in the lifetime of my children or their children, but it's definitely dead for now. And it's just one of the corpses lying in the debris of the destruction of Damascus. But there are many others. The reason I quoted Rumi earlier about the fools and the facts, I still see and have heard from people who consider themselves to be supporters of the Palestinian cause. I see Palestinian flags in their bios, and I see underneath those bios celebration at the destruction of the Syrian Arab Republic. They don't seem to realize that with the destruction of Syria came the destruction of the Palestinian struggle. Of course, the Palestinian people themselves will struggle until the last bullet runs out. But the last bullet will run out very soon, you know. I don't know if these fools are fully appraised of that singular fact, that every bullet, every one, in the hands of any Palestinian freedom fighter came through Syria from Iran. It didn't come from anywhere else. It couldn't come from anywhere else. It wouldn't have come from anywhere else. There's an amazing number of fools completely blind to that fact. Of course, the Palestinian people will continue to feel that they are a people. They'll continue to resist with their teeth if necessary. But their teeth may also very soon be destroyed. The only thing stopping now, this night, the opening of the gates of Rafah and the driving out of 2 million Palestinian refugees in Gaza, as the north of Gaza has been ethnically completely cleansed, the south of Gaza can be completely cleansed by the simple act of opening the gate which Israel controls at Rafah and driving all 2 million of them into the Sinai Desert in Egypt. Who's going to stop them? Who could stop them? Who would stop them? The answer to both those questions is nobody. So the only thing stopping it is Netanyahu's unwillingness for the moment to do it. But for how long will you be able to count on that unwillingness? Until January 20th? Maybe on January 20th? Maybe before the attack on Iraq that I talked about earlier begins? Maybe when it's completed? or maybe when it's happening. One way or another, Gaza is done for. Gaza is finished. Only a week ago, it was possible to talk about a strategic defeat of Israel that would deliver a Palestinian state. Iran was a regional superpower only a week ago. Syria was the transmission belt for the supply of the Lebanese resistance, of the Palestinian resistance. Now it is neither. And Iran is a local superpower with no regional potential or capabilities at all. Iran's still the big dog in the Persian Gulf, but it now has no crescent through which to exert its influence for the liberation of Palestine. And looking at my watch, it doesn't look likely that their much promised retaliation of Israeli crimes against them is going to come after all. A recognition of the truth that Iran, as well as Russia, as well as Syria, and as well as all the Arabs, are much diminished now in the wake of the great victory of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, with hardly a shot being fired in the former Syrian Arab Republic. You can celebrate that if you like, and there's a remarkable number of you doing so, but I can only be sad about it. Not because I loved Bashar al-Assad any more than I loved Saddam Hussein, but because the destruction of Arab power can only, as a matter of simple logic, lead to the strengthening of other powers adjacent. The destruction of Arab Iraq meant the strengthening of Persian Iran. The destruction of Arab Syria means the strengthening of the former colonial power in Turkey and a strengthening of the now occupying power of Netanyahu's Israel. It has been, you don't like to hear this, a stupendous success for Benjamin Netanyahu. It has been a stupendous success for Joe Biden in the dog days of his, until then, ill-starred presidential term. Anything that reduces Iran, reduces Russia, reduces China, increases the power and strength of the United States of America. These are simple geopolitical facts. If you make one of them stronger, you make the other weaker, and vice versa. And that's where we now are. There is no Arab national movement. There are heroic and beautiful individuals who exemplify it, who embody it, like my dear friend Man Bashur in Lebanon, who will be crying. I know there are many such people in all Arab countries, but they add up to less than a row of beans in the new political dispensation. Now there are only two kinds of Arabs. The takfiri, religious fanatics, who will takfir any dissent from their religious, never mind their political line, and the out-and-out slaves. But these are two sides of the same coin, you see. Because such takfiri Islamist fanaticism can never liberate the Arabs, has no wish to liberate the Arabs, doesn't even see itself as Arab. There were only 25,000 fighters in Golani's army, and 5,000 of those were Chinamen. Chinamen! Uyghurs who don't even speak Arabic, don't even know who the Arab music stars whose albums they're burning right now, don't even know who they are. Never tasted Syrian hummus or shakshuka. Don't care for it. They eat rice for their breakfast, you see. 5,000 out of 25,000 are Chinamen. Thousands more are Turkomen, Albanians, Ukrainians, who played a bigger role in the weekend's events than we hitherto imagined. They sent hundreds of drones, the Ukrainian regime, to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and sent 20 operators with them, the better to target them. So the ISIS-Al-Qaeda invasion, which has succeeded in taking over Syria, isn't even Arab. Never mind have an Arab consciousness about the unity of the Arab world. And they're very useful idiots indeed. As Israel found when, without firing a shot, they expanded into Syria 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip and took all the commanding heights forever, eternally, as Netanyahu has declared. That suits the West very well. They can murder their own people. Who cares? They can murder their Christians. Who cares? They can murder their religious minorities. Who cares? As long as they don't threaten Israel, which, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said so eloquently yesterday, is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East, is our eyes and ears in the Middle East, is the means by which we direct events in the Middle East. Congratulations, Bobby, at least you're willing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Or you can go the whole hog and be a slave. You can be a slave regime. Like the other frontline states, you can bark when you are ordered to. You can hang out your tongue and pant. And you can beg like a dog begs. You might even get the World Cup thrown in 2034 if you do. So the new world isn't being born after all. The old world isn't dying after all. The new world is still a pregnancy. It may, indeed, I believe, will have to one day come, but it ain't here yet. China issued no more than a couple of cross communiques about the events at the weekend, even though it's the end of the Silk Road, thousands of years in the making. The Russians left town. The full fruit of the 50-year friendship treaty with Syria being a billet and a doctor's surgery to work in Moscow for the departed President Bashar al-Assad and his family. Good luck to them. I didn't want them to end the way that Saddam ended. I wouldn't want them, God forbid, to end the way that Gaddafi ended. But maybe he should have at least made a televised address before he scuttled off to Moscow, killing off forever the very idea of Syria. Syria was a shining light, you know, and for centuries. They threw their lot in with the West during the First World War. They were persuaded by Lawrence of Arabia that if they took up arms against the Ottomans and helped the West to defeat them, that the West in return would give Arab independence, Arab unity, and give Jerusalem the status that it deserved. What they did not know, or if they knew, chose to ignore, was that in the back room, Mr. Sykes and Mr. Picot were cooking up the books, which would divide the Arabs and which would grant Jerusalem to a Zionist state, which now lies at the heart of all this darkness. We're going to discuss it tonight with two perfect guests. Coming up right after this is Richard Medhurst, the renowned independent journalist, political analyst, and a young man who was born and baptized in what used to be called Syria. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now we've got a poll running. It belongs in the drawer marked "Is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the woods? Will Syria become a jihadi state?" Answers yes or no. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Get voting now. 25,000 people have already voted. We want your point of view well and truly recorded. And if you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Richard Medhurst, as aforementioned, joins me now. Richard, my condolences to you and your family. Your country has died, has it not?
Yeah, George, it has. It's it's interesting watching them whitewash what's going on in the media. You know, they, in Britain at least, and I think it's been changed in the US now, but HTS is a prescribed organization. You'll recall they arrested me under the Terrorism Act, but I haven't seen anyone at the Telegraph or at the BBC or Sky News being arrested for glorifying HTS. So, you know, that it's funny how the Terrorism Act just randomly applies when you're serving, you're whitewashing a group that serves the interests of MI6 in Israel and Turkey. But yeah, the country's died. It has died, and things are deteriorating rapidly. You know, they said initially that they'll protect journalists, that anyone who harasses journalists will be sent to prison, that all minorities will have protections, that soldiers will be given amnesty. But everything we've been seeing in the last 48 hours indicates the opposite. Now, we can't tell, whether it's just HTS that's doing that, which is Al-Qaeda, right? We should be very clear. HTS is Al-Qaeda. But you have about 37 other factions that are running around the country. And, even if it's the other factions, what kind of rule is this, or rule of law, when you can just walk around executing people, because that's what's happening. We have public beatings, public executions. There are videos, for example, of ISIS trucks driving down Christian neighborhoods, firing AKs into the air. I'm hearing that they've told Christians not to, put out Christmas decorations, although I haven't verified that yet, but I can definitely imagine it already having happened in certain areas in Syria now. And just yesterday, there's a Christian journalist, so like me, ticks both boxes, being harassed about her religion inside of a Christian neighborhood. So yeah, the country's died, and they want to make it about Bashar al-Assad. It's not about Bashar al-Assad. It's about the secularism that Syria had. It's about its diversity, its pluralism. That is what has died, and that is definitely worth mourning.
But its territorial integrity has also died. It was already gravely wounded. Parts of Syria had been amputated and were already under the control of the new Ottoman Emperor, Erdogan, of Kurdish rebel groups backed, controlled by the United States. But now the Turkish and above all the Israeli incursions into the country mean that even the map of Syria has died.
Yeah, that's correct. It's the second time too, or third time actually, because if you look at sykespicot, when they chopped Syria up into smaller pieces. You were talking about Lawrence of Arabia just before the break. So, shortly after the Ottomans were defeated, France and Britain carved up Syria into smaller pieces. That they created Israel. They wanted to put all the Christians in Lebanon, and they gave parts of Syria to Turkey, to Iraq, and now in 2019, after 2019, you had Turkey occupying Idlib in northern Syria. And that's where a lot of these terrorist groups were based, including HTS for the last couple of years. And they weren't even using Syrian currency anymore in Idlib. They were using Turkish currency for the last couple of years. So it was de facto annexed by Turkey, a NATO member. And the United States was stealing all the oil east of the Euphrates with the Kurdish SDF. And Israel was occupying the Golan Heights, but now for a third time they've taken even more land. Syria has just had its highest peak in the country, Mount Hermon, which is in the Golan Heights, captured by Israel. This is a strategic prize of enormous proportions. Not only does it have a lot of water in it, but it's a vantage point. So militarily speaking, it overlooks Israeli troop positions. It's just, a prized asset for Syria's defenses. And these people who claim to represent Syria's interests, who've just taken over Damascus, didn't bother fighting the Israelis. They just let them have it without a fight, without firing a shot. So in whose interests are they acting? So it's not only they've given away land, which is even 1 centimeter of that land is precious, but also strategic land. And in addition to that, of course, the water resources, Israel's already, I think 1/3 of their drinking water is stolen from Syria regularly from the Golan, and now they probably have more of it. And, the problem is that Israel has gone and hollowed out the entire military infrastructure that Syria had left. So any government that comes along now is not going to be sovereign or legitimate. It's a neutered shadow of its former self. Not to mention that it's being run by a bunch of head-chopping lunatics. So Syria has no navy left. It's got no missiles left. It's got no air force left. All of it has been destroyed. Research laboratories, you name it. This is the biggest Israeli air force campaign in history. And they've destroyed Syria's defenses. They have left it defenseless. And these people in Damascus who've taken over now let that happen.
Well, I always used to say about the Soviet Union, another country from the past, that a state for which no one will fight, a state for which no one is prepared to die, is a state which has come to the end of its usefulness. That was true of the Soviet Union. It's equally true of Syria. Nobody fought to defend it. In fact, I've seen video of Russians driving one way towards the front and thousands upon thousands of Syrian soldiers walking in the opposite direction. Of course, there are always many reasons for the collapse of a state. But in summary, if you can, because it's a long story, what was it at the end that precipitated this really unprecedented collapse?
I really couldn't say for sure, George. There are many factors. I think the sanctions really served as one of the final nails in the coffin, right? Plural. Because they, even though the borders, or if you will, the battle lines, rather, didn't move for the last couple of years since 2019 until now, and things were relatively stable, the sanctions really, really crippled the country. And those were put in place by Donald Trump, the Caesar Act sanctions. They crippled the country. They destroyed it. I mean, but last time I was in Syria, you could exchange €1 or $1 for, 50, 60 Syrian pounds. So it's pretty good, and today it's like 13,000 or something. So you can see how they've destroyed the currency through inflation and devaluation. It's awful, and people suffered under that. And I'm assuming that made it difficult to pay wages as well. But I can't imagine. I know the video you're talking about, by the way, with the Russians cursing in the truck as they're driving past. I was trying to understand like what precipitated the fact that all of these troops are just giving up. And I'm thinking, and it's just my hunch. I don't have any proof for this, but it's my hunch that there was maybe some sort of coup. That, and I'm talking in the top brass of the military, maybe those people were bought off, maybe they themselves were exhausted, as the army was itself. I don't know what the reason was, but my hunch is maybe they were bought. They told the troops to surrender, and by the time Assad realized what was going on, it was too late, and he just fled to Moscow. This is just one scenario that I'm suggesting. I don't know if it's 100% true. I think we'll find out in good time and in due course. But it was the sanctions really did the country, and not to mention the fact that 1/4 of Syria's revenue depended on oil. 1/4 of the government's revenue. That's what subsidizes free education, free healthcare, renovation of public infrastructure. And the Americans were stealing that for the last couple of years. So you can imagine that's 1/4 of the government's revenue gone out the window. All these years, and before the Americans and the SDF, Kurdish SDF, was stealing it, ISIS was stealing it and selling it to Turkey. So for years and years, they've been hollowing out the state's resources. And these are things that people's livelihoods depended on, that the standard of living depended on. And I think it just the war really ground everybody down. Some deal was obviously made. Not one bullet was fired. We have to remember that they took over the country. Al-Qaeda took over the country without a fight. So that means a deal was made, and we'll find out at what point. But Erdogan is clearly behind this. I think we shouldn't. We talk about the US and we talk about Israel. We shouldn't forget the role that Turkey has played. Turkey kept Al-Qaeda. They kept Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and al-Jolani nice and cozied up inside of Idlib. They financed a lot of these troops. They kept them safe. They gave them salaries. And they allowed all of these foreign fighters to come into Syria in the first place already back in 2011, 2012 and onwards. So they opened the gates of hell onto Syria and destroyed the country.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to hand it to them. We are journalists after all. Our defeat is their victory. And there's no point in denying that. The question for me is Turkey acting independently or is it acting as an adjunct of the United States? Now, the Iranian leader, in his talk today, Khamenei, he obliquely referred to Turkey as a neighboring country, which played a role, but he tried to place the main responsibility on the United States and Israel. Now, that may have been self-serving on his part, because today a very big trade deal between Turkey and Iran was announced. I don't know. But I'd be interested in your theory. To what extent is Turkey now an independent power, acting separately and independently of the United States?
Well, I know that people are aware that Turkey and the US are NATO allies and members, Turkey actually has one of the most important armies in NATO. So they have that common interest of seeing Syria destroyed, but for various reasons. The United States has for a long time wanted to control the resources there, but Turkey wants to get rid of the Kurds, right? It considers the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, and its affiliate inside of Syria, the YPG, to be terrorist groups. And it basically classifies them as terrorists to persecute them. I mean, what they've done now is they've effectively encircled the Kurds inside of Syria by driving Al-Qaeda down into Damascus. And then, of course, they've got them from the north. So these are the areas of Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor, everything that's east of the Euphrates. So in that regard, Turkey is acting independently, and Erdogan wants to make sure that no Kurdish state emerges. And I mean, it's just persecution, really. You know, there's no other way around it. They were cutting water to these areas many times. I covered that, how, you know, they would just cut off the water supply to everybody inside of Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor, just for the sake of making sure that Kurds wouldn't get water. So in that aspect, Turkey has a different agenda from the Americans, because the Americans work with the Kurds to take the oil, take the crops, and you know, they then drive that off into Iraq, into their bases there, and make money off of it. And you know, it's so in that regard, they've got different agendas. But Syria is the link that was the lifeline between Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon and Palestine. It's a geographical link between all of them, and a political one. Okay, I wish people would look at maps more often and read maps more often, because it makes things very clear. So, you know, Erdogan has been supplying oil to the Israelis from Azerbaijan, from Baku, and helping them with their war effort. He's helping Israel commit genocide in Palestine, despite all of his rhetoric. So Erdogan, along with the United States and along with Israel, it's in their interest to stop Syria acting as a link, a natural link between Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon, Palestine. They wanted to destroy this, you know, resistance axis for quite a while, and they've essentially conspired to do it together. But everybody wins. You know, the Americans win, Israel wins, and Turkey wins, and Al Qaeda wins. So their interests happened to all converge at the same time, and I think we'll find out in due course, you know, whether. By that point, Iran and Russia, who were the main backers of Bashar al-Assad, were even in a position to do anything about it. I think by the time everything had fallen apart, I think maybe they hadn't caught on, and that's why they just got Assad over to Moscow. Because why didn't they do it last year, for example? Or why didn't he resign 10 years ago? Why only now? It's not a coincidence that this started right during the ceasefire in Lebanon. So Israel's been systematically going, you know, from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria, and I think Iran is next on the chopping block, I'm afraid.
Well, perhaps Iraq first. Now, the Iranians predict, and we've seen this movie before, of course, when ISIS drove across the desert in their Toyotas, in their thousands, and took over Iraq's second city of Mosul. Again, a city filled with ethnic and religious minorities, and had a reign of terror there. It's where ISIS first came to the notice of the general public. Do you think they might, thousands of them, turn up in Iraq anytime soon?
Yeah, absolutely, George. I think there's going to be blowback, and I think you're going to have a lot of these fighters returning to their countries and causing trouble there. Just yesterday, there were whispers, rumors going around that the Uyghurs who have been fighting inside of Syria have seized a stockpile of missiles. They're Grads. They have a range of about just 20 or 25 kilometers. So I don't know how they're going to reach China, but they threatened to use them against China. And I was suggesting that, you know, we keep hearing about China persecuting Muslims, and yet these Uyghurs are busy fighting in Syria. Thousands of them, by the way, thousands. But it's not just Uyghurs. You've got people from Chechnya, you've got people from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, Earlier on in the war, you had many fighters coming in from Libya, from Tunisia, from other Arab countries. And I think at one point, they're going to be returning and causing trouble. And of course, you've got people from Turkey itself who've come in, not just through Turkey, but from Turkey. So they will definitely destabilize Iraq. And as a matter of fact, I look at the war in Syria as an extension of the Iraq war in the first place, because ISIS was, it was created, it started in Iraq, and it spilled over into Syria. It's a very predictable consequence, and it's going to have very negative reverberations for a long time. I don't know why people, they just, no one learns, it seems like no one learns from this. And seeing people cheer for what's going on without thinking, just 2 minutes ahead about what about Syria's future? What about next door in Iraq? What about the impact this will have on the Levant? It's like no one cares. And the ignorance is staggering. And the language they use is even the same as the State Department and MI6 and this constant, these buzzwords about dictator and tyrant and murderous regime. Like no one is denying it. Assad ruled with an iron fist. And same thing with Saddam Hussein, and same thing with Gaddafi. But when you destabilize these countries, they become failed states, and well, rather failed is perhaps the wrong word. It's more like sabotage states. And their future is uncertain, and it impacts everybody negatively. And when we're talking about what might happen with Iraq, it's because Saddam Hussein was removed. We wouldn't be having that conversation if there was someone there still in charge, running the country efficiently to a certain degree, right? Again, they rule with an iron fist, but they provide security and stability. Once you remove those leaders, you cause chaos across the entire region. And that's what's happened. And it's going to keep continuing now. We're seeing just a reverberation of Iraq into Syria, and now maybe back into Iraq. It's really a bad thing. And I'll just remind the viewers that 80% of the Christians in Iraq disappeared after the US-UK invasion in 2003. Not all of them were killed, but many were, and the rest of them fled the country. So that 80% with a zero, gone. What's going to happen now in Syria? What's going to happen with the Christians of Syria? Remember, we're not talking about Christians in Muslim countries. We are talking about the original Christians, the first converts who've been there since, the first century. These are their descendants. So the West and Israel and Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they're helping to destroy an indigenous Christian community, the oldest one in the world, through their actions. And that's despicable, but regardless, it's really despicable.
Well, because I'm older than you, I put the collapse of Syria down to being an aftershock of the fall of the Soviet Union all these decades ago. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Medhurst. This won't be the last time we talk, and indeed you're speaking tomorrow night on the No to NATO platform, which will dive more deeply into these issues than we have been able to do. Richard Medhurst, independent journalist, political analyst, born and baptized in Syria, as was. Thank you very much for joining us. Will Syria become a jihadi state? Yes or no? 25,635 of you have had your say. It's pretty overwhelming, though not entirely one-sided. I'll be back with some callers right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
There was a zoo in Kathmandu in which a leopard apparently changed its spots, but no photographic evidence is available. Will the ISIS Al-Qaeda 37 faction coalition now running Syria behave according to how they used to behave, or how the CNN would quite like them to renovate themselves? You have your say on this poll. Will Syria become a jihadi state? Yes or no? Phone numbers again. It's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and across the world, 0044 966 2625. Now we've got a call. It's very early morning there, so she is a keen participant in the mother of all talk shows. It's Hanan in Sydney on Syria. I told you it was the global university of the airwaves. Hanan, welcome. What would you like to say?
Good morning, George. I would like to say the scenario, what's happening in Syria and how I see it. I think because of the fact that when the Al-Qaeda came to in Syria recently, the Syrian army didn't even fight it with them. The Syrian army even didn't throw a bullet on them. So that's very surprising. We say they are 25,000, but they are a group of different people, and you know what I meant is the Syrian army is a strong army, and they know how to fight those jihadi because they had years of fighting with them. So it was I was completely surprised that the Syrian army didn't fight at all. And what is also surprised me also with that Russian army, nothing with no fight, with nothing. Suddenly they took their I don't know, everything they like the ship, their things, everything they left. It doesn't make sense to me. The border of Syria is already open for Al-Qaeda, and with no fight, definitely with no resistance, with nothing. They moved easily. They reached by 3 days to Damascus. It doesn't make sense. So what I think there is a scenario that Russia and America, they had a deal before all this, and they reached to a conclusion. I think that Russia give up Syria. They might America will give them the part of Ukraine they want, because that make it. They cannot, after years of they supported Bashar al-Assad for years, and they fight it in Syria. How come they give up like this, with no fight, with nothing, and they leave? So,
these are entirely legitimate questions, but your questions have to be based on accurate premise, and in this case, they're not. Russia did not have an army in Syria. It had an air force in Syria, which was bombing non-stop the HTS, Al-Qaeda, ISIS insurgency just the day before, maybe 2 days before that Damascus fell. They still have naval warships in Tartus. It's said, though I haven't seen it said by anyone on the Russian side, that they have assurances, presumably brokered by Erdogan, who wants to keep both a leg in both camps, that their ships will not be harmed. But I would describe that as a deal not worth the paper it's not written on. And so I have to assume that eventually, if not now, the Russian naval base at Tartus, which they've had for more than half a century, will be closed, and Russia will be denied that port of access into the Mediterranean, and will have to rely on other, perhaps Algeria. I'm not sure. But the loss of prestige for Russia is considerable, particularly in the Arab world. There's no doubt about it that the reason that Bashar al-Assad could walk tall was because he had a rock-solid allyship with Russia, whose prestige was rising. When you ask where was the Russian army, it's fighting 29 NATO countries in Ukraine. That's where the Russian army is. You say that there might have been a deal that America allows them to keep parts of the Ukraine, but they already have those parts of the Ukraine, and America was not under a warmongering government able to do anything about it. And in a couple of weeks, there'll be a government in power in Washington that doesn't want to be at war with Russia and is going to force Zelensky or his heirs and successors to accept the territory that has been lost, is lost forever. So I don't think your theories, whilst everyone's entitled to them, hold up. But the point that you make about the collapse of the army is a very potent one, powerful one. And it's a very suspicious set of circumstances indeed. Of course, some people are trying to rewrite the history of the last few weeks. The Iranians, for example, say, and the supreme leader said it this day, that they warned Bashar al-Assad 3 months ago that something was up, that the Idlib was on the move and preparing for an attack on Aleppo. Nobody could have assumed that, having taken Aleppo so easily, that if they just kept on walking, the Syrian army would keep on retreating, and in a couple of days, they'd end up in power in Damascus. Nobody is claiming to have foreseen that. But the Iranians are clear that they warned Bashar al-Assad that there was a move afoot. Why then was the Tiger Battalion of the Republican Guard, prime troops of President Bashar, the pride of the Syrian army with their modern, powerful tanks, why were they withdrawn from Aleppo before the takfiris attacked it? I want to know the answer to that, just for academic purposes, because I've always believed that there's no point in crying over spilt milk, and this milk is well and truly spilled. Now, there may be, I doubt it, there may be elements of the former Syrian army, as there were elements of the former Iraqi army, that will see this national humiliation, will see the humiliation and oppression of their own community, Alawiyin community, for example, Christian community, Shia community. They may well be harboring the wish to fight back, organize themselves, find arms from somewhere, to fight back against these Chinamen and Turkmen and waiters from Indian restaurants in Cardiff. And every fanatic in the world, by the way, must now be on their way to Syria. If you think about it, every sleeping cell all over the world will want to get a taste of the action in what is now the motherland of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They finally got a state of their own to call their own, thanks to us. Hallelujah. Hanan, thanks for the call. Now, if you want to make comments on the YouTube, you can scan the QR code, is I think the lingo, and leave a comment. And if it's clean and interesting, we'll read it out. Ange says, the world has died, Richard. And Christina Hines says, on British television, HTS say they now recognize diversity and wanted to reassure the Syrians. Hours later, they were slaughtering innocent, unarmed civilians, just like Israel slaughters Palestinians. And Monkey Boy says, don't worry, Jimmy Starmer and Donut Dada Lamy are rebranding the ISIS and Al-Qaeda rebel head choppers who now control Syria, so they can take them off the terrorist list. And Ramplens01 says the rebels are sweeping houses to find any photos or support for Assad, looting them and going after professional people that could help the country to advance in any way, like engineers and others. And Toby Neighbor says, anyone with 2 brain cells knows what's coming. Thanks to the idiots who cheered for this. Well, Eve is in Florida. A very wise man. He wants to talk about Iran, Russia, and Syria. And we're lucky that he does come here to do it. Go ahead, Eve. What do you want to say?
Well, what I want to say is that it's not all bad. And I'm going to, even though the point you made for the supply of Hezbollah, this is a critical thing, but I'm going to tell you why I think it's not all bad. First of all, Richard Medhurst says that Syria died last weekend, but no, Syria died probably about 5 years ago. It takes a long time to hollow out a country. What happened is 3 days ago we found the corpse of the army, but the army was not existent. Everybody had been bribed. And one thing that people have to know is that it's not just the Caesar Act who killed Syria, is that they give money to the general and to certain people, plus the Caesar Act, which show corruption and which basically kills a regime. But what you made the transition for me with NATO, because one thing which is going to be good, I think, is that NATO has a chance to go, and I'm going to tell you why. Russia is probably very happy to have been warned a little bit ahead of time that Syria was gone, because now they can concentrate on Ukraine, take exactly what they want, and probably they will take Odessa now, I think. And second, they cannot be pressured into a freezing of the conflict, because we have seen the freezing of the conflict in Idlib, and we have seen what happened when you let that the other guy gets ready and run you over. So the thing is that NATO is going to be greatly hurt by a very big defeat in Ukraine, and now I am convinced of that, and I want that for Europe and for Russia and for America. Russia needs to win that war decisively. The second thing is, what is the number one thing for Turkey? Because a lot of things were saying Erdogan is a bad guy, he's a good guy, but the number one for Turkey is this business of Rojava and the Kurds. And now the Kurds think they have it. They have their Rojava. And Erdogan is going to also, it is his time to put an end to this Kurdish state, because the Kurdish state will be another Israel. It will be another disaster, because as you notice, America supports those mono-ethnic supremacist countries like Israel, Kurdistan potential, the boundaries it's not a hazard, why you have that. So NATO is going to be attacked from within because of the looming conflict between the US and Turkey because of the Kurds. So this is going to weaken NATO tremendously, which is a very good thing. And that's the point. I could say anything, but that's the point I wanted to make.
Well, you made it very powerfully, Yves. It's definitely food for thought. Now, I mentioned the podcast earlier. We're now in the top 40 in Australia, top 30 in Ireland, top 20 in South Africa. We're number 2 in Kuwait and number 6 in Zimbabwe. And we've passed 250,000 streams on Spotify this week. See if you can get us up to 500,000 by Christmas. Why don't you? Scan the QR code to get the MOATS podcast from tomorrow morning. Coming up is the one and only Miko Peled, Israeli author and activist and broadcaster. He is really something. If you don't know that, you will in just a minute or so's time. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Miko Peled, Israeli author and activist, joins me now. Miko, the Israeli public and their political leaders seem oddly sanguine about an ISIS Al-Qaeda nest next door in Damascus. Are they right to be so relaxed about that? Or do they know something about ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the alphabet soup of fanaticism that we don't know?
Thank you for having me on the show again, George. I think that what Israeli politicians and what Israel likes in general is the idea of chaos. So there's instability. It's not really clear who's in charge, and they feel that they can take more chunks of Syria and can control it. So they've always liked chaos in the Arab world. They always like to see instability in the countries that surround them. It makes them look better, and it also allows them to do whatever they like because there's nobody that is, in fact, standing against them. So I think that's what they find attractive, and that's why they like the latest developments in Syria.
But the idea that Israel and ISIS Al-Qaeda are, if you like, ideological enemies is false, isn't it? Because ISIS and Al-Qaeda have never as much as broken a window in Israel or belonging to Israel, while slaughtering thousands of, tens of thousands of Muslims and others abroad and in Syria.
Well, again, I don't think that Israel has an ideology that guides it one way or the other. As long as they can be in control, as long as the surrounding area, there's chaos and they can take advantage of it, they're happy. they don't, I think when we look at the allies that Israel has had over the years of its existence, from apartheid South Africa to dictators in Latin America and so on and so forth, they don't they don't really care about the quality of the partner. All they care about is what's in it for them, and if they can accomplish their very narrow-minded, myopic objectives, then they're happy. So right now, more chaos, more instability, a lack of clarity in Syria, and they're already, as you know, they're already taking chunks of Syrian land.
Yeah, I mean, what's stopping them taking more? Nothing at the moment. The world is not even being told by our media that these land grabs, equivalent to 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip, have already happened. And so there's no condemnation of any kind, and certainly no one physically in a position to stop them, even if the new authorities in Damascus were of a mind to, which I think is extremely unlikely, but even if they were, they would not be able to. So what's stopping Netanyahu from occupying, 1/3 of Syria? What's stopping him from capturing Damascus? He could drive in unarmored vehicles.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because there was a video on social media that's doing quite well of an Israeli soldier inside Syria pretending to hitch a ride with an Israeli military truck going to Damascus. So I think these are things that they're definitely thinking about. Again, I think the biggest concern that most people have about Syria is that it will be fragmented and cut into pieces. And Israel will definitely take a chunk of that. There's no question about that. And again, I have no doubt that they are already planning an excursion, if not all the way to Damascus, then certainly getting as close to Damascus as possible. And we've seen Israel do this in Lebanon. It's nothing new. And they've been, I think, really dreaming of the day when they can actually see their tanks and their military personnel on the outskirts of Damascus. I definitely think that this is a realistic possibility.
Now, it's all been tremendous change for the Palestinian struggle, hasn't it? It doesn't, of course, negate the Palestinian desire for statehood, more or less universally felt amongst Palestinians. But the means of achieving it have now radically narrowed. The strategic defeat of Israel is literally no longer possible. Iran has been knocked back into its box. Syria is no longer available for the supply and resupply of the resistance in Lebanon, and the means of delivering weapons from Iran to Gaza and to the West Bank have been greatly interfered with, haven't they? So is this a time when some Palestinian voices might emerge saying that it's the end of the era of armed struggle for Palestinian statehood and that we need to look at other ways?
Well, I think it's obvious as we look at the 70, 80-year-old occupation of Palestine and the creativity in which Palestinians have come up with different ways to resist. As I'm sure you know, the larger portion, the lion's share of Palestinian resistance has not been armed resistance. The armed resistance has been a small portion relative to all the other ways. So I'm sure Palestinians are going to find other ways to resist, whether it's through civil society, whether it's through people in the streets around the world that support the Palestinian cause, whether through an institution like ours here in Washington, D.C., Palestine House of Freedom. These are all unarmed methods of pushing forward the agenda of a liberation of Palestine. And I think that's really where the focus is going to be. I don't know that anybody ever seriously thought that the military option was going to be the one that will free Palestine. Perhaps it was going to be a segment of it. But I think the vast majority of Palestinians, and really what we've seen Palestinians adapt very quickly to the reality. I mean, this is not the first the first time that we've seen crises like this around Palestine, and Palestinians adapt very, very quickly and come up with, newer, better, more ingenious ways to resist and to push forward the liberation of their country and their people. So again, this might be a setback militarily, but I don't think it's going to be. I mean, the situation is severe, granted. I mean, the situation in Palestine is beyond words. It is so horrifying. But I'm confident that the movement around the world, plus the determination and of the Palestinian people united, will be able to overcome this and push for a free Palestine sooner rather than later.
Of course, this very evening, Netanyahu could open the gate of Rafah and drive out the remaining Palestinians, those that haven't been killed, those that haven't been amputated and can no longer walk and don't have a wheelchair, could drive out the remaining Palestinians into the Sinai. Nothing would stop them. Nobody would stop them. Many politicians in the West would cheer them on. The new chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the US Congress, across the road from you, is a uniform-wearing member of the Israel Defense Force. He proudly wears his Israeli army uniform into the US Congress. And there's an interregnum now. Trump isn't in. No one knows what his view would be on it anyway, but might not Netanyahu sense this as the moment to finish Gaza once and for all?
Who knows? I mean, we the only thing we know about Trump and the people that are coming into power with him is that they're not predictable. But I'm of the opinion that the push to liberate Palestine needs to be ongoing, uniform, and completely disregard what is happening in terms of the politics here in the United States or the Israeli politics. The push has to be consistent. It has to be formidable. And I think that, and I truly believe that once we change the conversation, it's not going to matter who sits in these positions. As I'm sure you recall, one day it was okay to support apartheid in South Africa. The next day, nobody was able to say that in public, that they support apartheid anymore. So I think when the change comes, it's going to come across the board, and what their personal opinions on the issue is not going to matter. And that's really the objective I think we should be aiming for, to create a reality where the conversation is so decidedly pro-Palestine, is so decidedly pro-justice and freedom, that all these clowns and their uniforms and their masquerading around here will no longer be relevant. And like I said, we don't know. There's a great deal of a sense of unpredictability with this new regime that's coming into Washington. But we do know that there's a whole army of freshman congressmen coming in who, as I understand it, don't even know what the word occupation means, probably couldn't find Palestine on the map. So in a way, it's an opportunity for us to present that to them, to present them with the talking points, to present them with the education, if you will, that they need in order to make the right decisions when the time comes.
Now, the last time we spoke, Netanyahu's career looked in real serious jeopardy. It doesn't look that way tonight. This has been a dazzling few weeks for him. The destruction of the military political leadership of Hezbollah, the conquering of Syria, not only the solidifying of control over the Golan, but actual amplification, expansion of that. Israel is much larger than it was the last time I spoke to you, and its leader much stronger. Might this be a time for him to go for early elections, try to win and put to bed the legal threats to him?
I think what's interesting about him is right now it almost seems like he's using the legal issue, the so-called legal threat, as an advantage. He shows up in court, he's very relaxed, he's very calm, public opinion supports him, those who don't support him are really an insignificant minority, an insignificant opposition. I don't think he'd want to rock the boat with elections because he's doing fine. And, you know, why rock the boat? He's doing well, and I'm sure when the next elections come up, unless he's challenged by someone like Ben-Gvir, which I doubt, I think his seat is safe. So you're right, he is doing very, very well. He is the only, real candidate for prime minister within Israeli politics, I think. I don't think anybody matches him in their skill and in their ability to win elections. Last time Trump was in office, he gave Netanyahu one of the best gifts any Israeli prime minister ever received, which is the sovereignty over Jerusalem and moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and the recognition of the Golan Heights as Israeli territory. Who knows what Trump might be giving him this time? So yes, you're right. He's riding high. He's doing very well, all the way to the point that even his legal issues he's learned how to use the legal issues to his advantage. And so, this is the reality in Israeli politics still, that he is the one man that can hold it together, and I'm sure he will continue to hold it together.
Well, good luck with the new fleet of Congress people that you're going to have to deal with. Let's hope they're better than the last ones. Thank you, Miko Peled, Israeli author, activist, and campaigner, now based in the United States with the Palestinian Freedom House. Thank you so much for being with us. The poll is 26,628 votes now. Will Syria become a jihadi state? Yes or no? You've got about half an hour left to vote on that. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri. Stay tuned. Even though it has moved its mass murder campaign from Gaza, although there's still mass murdering in Gaza, of course, no day off for the poor refugees in the concentration camp of Gaza, but they have moved their killing fields to Lebanon. Lebanon, a sovereign country. Lebanon, a member of the United Nations. Lebanon, a country to which every other country in the world has diplomatic relations, has ambassadors in place, is being remorselessly bombed with hundreds and hundreds of air attacks, killing hundreds and hundreds of people every day, most of them women and children. Was it ever thus? As I said the other night, put the letter H in front of any Arab child and you can slaughter them with impunity. Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all look the same. They all are deserving of death, violent, sudden death, delivered from American airplanes, using American missiles and bombs, with British airplanes supplying the targeting information and the offending American and British reconnaissance flights flying out of somebody else's country, namely Cyprus, and the British sovereign base there.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Call me toll-free, US, Canada, +1 844 944 3344. UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. Worldwide, 0044 203 966 2625. Amy in Canada just has, and she is on now about Syria. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, George, and thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk about the Syrian crisis and its implications in Africa, because as everybody remembers, when United States with France invaded Libya and they killed Gaddafi, it unleashed a lot of terrorists in Africa, especially in the Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And they're still struggling with the horde of terrorists. And now that Syria is in chaos, it's very dangerous for the region, and maybe it's already happening. Terrorists all over the place, and it's going to spread all over the Middle East and maybe in Africa again. So there's a saying that says, you don't know what you got till it's gone. A lot of people are happy that Assad is gone, but it's going to be worse. I'm not saying that I'm not a supporter of Assad. I know that he did a lot of bad things. I'm not supporting him. But he was holding the country together, like Saddam Hussein and like Gaddafi. I don't like those people. I don't like them. But we have to recognize that with them, the country was secular, like Richard said. It's the same scenario. And it seems that we don't learn. They've been doing that for 20 years. And I'm really concerned because I'm African. And it's too much. We have had enough with all this chaos just for the sake of a little bit, a tiny fraction of oligarchs in the United States, in France, and in Israel. The people is not even benefiting from the chaos. They say yes for our interest, but it's not even for the interest of the people. France, they have colonies in Africa, but only a tiny fraction of French oligarchs are taking advantage of that. The people of France, they are poor, they are suffering, but nobody is saying anything. So we really have to wake up.
No, you're right.
And to stop this madness.
Well, a very powerful call, Amy. A very powerful call. You mentioned the song that includes the line, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." There's another song which has, I'm sure, a refrain saying something like, "Be careful what you wish for." And we now have Al-Qaeda and ISIS have got their own state. That means they can allow anybody into it that they want. I'm presuming, unless they've got other plans, how would I know? But I'm presuming that for a holiday at least, every fanatic extremist in the world is headed for Syria. But they won't stay there because, well, Syria is very poor and in a very bad situation. So they'll go there. They'll do terrorist training. They'll do weapons training. They'll learn military rudiments. They'll network with each other. They'll gain ideological, theological strengthening from each other. And then they'll go back to where they came from. And where they came from might be somewhere near you. That's, after all, what happened to the poor people in Manchester. The poor children that went to see Ariana Grande and left in pieces. Their limbs severed one from the other. Their lives lost. Their blood on the floor of the Manchester Arena. That's what happened to them. The fanatics of the Libyan Islamic fighting group, they didn't try to hide behind a name, was deliberately fostered in the city of Manchester, then deliberately sent to Libya to fight and destroy Gaddafi, and then did all what I've just talked about, the weapons training, the ideological training, the bomb-making skills, and then they came back to Manchester. And one of them blew up all these little children. So be careful what you wish for. Syria is now ISIS, Al-Qaeda central, with a state, with all the attributes for a terrorist that means. Fake passports, fake means of secreting themselves in cells around the world. Nobody's worried about that. Israel's not worried about it for reasons you can only speculate about. I gave Miko Peled the chance to speculate about it. He didn't take it. Maybe he doesn't believe it. But I believe it. I believe that the intentions of Israel and ISIS Al-Qaeda are and have been for a long time identical. Doesn't mean they're the same thing. Certainly doesn't mean that every fighter for ISIS and Al-Qaeda knows that. He's actually fighting for Israeli interests, but I believe that that's what they are doing. So all these terrorists that will now hum around Syria like around a honeypot will turn up in a conference center near you, perhaps. At a concert near you, perhaps. It may not be the last thing that you see or hear advancing towards you, but you've got to worry that it might be, don't you? Our leaders don't seem remotely concerned about it. Again, perhaps they know something that we don't know, but if you look at the last 10 years, the last 15 years, almost, in fact, the last 25 years since the 9/11 phenomenon, the rise of Al-Qaeda and so on, they've done a lot of damage. They've killed a lot of people. And they were innocent people, just walking over London Bridge. Innocent people, just at the Ariana Grande concert in the arena. Innocent people in the Bataclan. Innocent people in Brussels, in France, at German Christmas markets, and so on. So I hate and fear these people. Our leaders, less so. Now, No to NATO, No to War is on tomorrow night at 9 p.m. UK. 9 p.m. It's presented this week by my friend Chris Williamson, former Member of Parliament and Deputy Leader of my party, the Workers' Party of Britain, and the guests include Richard Medhurst and Piers Robinson. So join Chris tomorrow night at 9 p.m. UK time on my YouTube channel and no doubt elsewhere. Well, we got one person up early in Sydney. We've got our old friend Sean. He's up early in Australia too. Sean, top of the morning to you.
Greetings, Mr. Galloway. How are you going?
All good, my friend. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I think we're in dark days. I saw Gayatri's post the other day and agreed with every word she said. And I've never been an Assad apologist, but you know what they've done here? They've used the oldest trick in the book of divide and conquer. You know, and I feel like I'm with you, George. I feel like we're watching the Greater Israel Project in real time now. This, you know, as Richard said, you know, it's the biggest military operation they've ever had with the aircraft and so on. And I just want to say, you know, I think this is a disaster for the region and the world, and it's most definitely a disaster for the Palestinian people. That's for sure. That corridor being cut off.
Yeah, I think that's right, Sean. Yeah, I mean, the Syrian people are the biggest losers, but the Palestinian people are definitely the second biggest losers. Their cause is unutterably and probably unalterably changed for the worse. And Israel knows that. Israel now knows that right at this moment, it can do anything that it wants to them. And absolutely nobody, nothing, is going to stop them. So good luck being at the mercy of Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich and the rest. Last word to you, Sean.
Couple of things, George. I wanted to echo what you said earlier as well. You know, former comrades of mine, people I've stood shoulder to shoulder with, whooping and hollering like jackasses, you know, frankly disgusts me. You know, and it's not one of their finest hours. Let's put it that way. And then just to rub our noses in it at the end, you know, they announced the World Cup in Saudi. Just before I go as well, George, anyone who's listening, I strongly encourage you to follow George via the Patreon. I've been doing so for quite some time, and it's great value. You get great content, and we've got to now more than ever before. We need to keep this going, and we need to have a voice. So I'd strongly encourage anyone to follow you via the Patreon. Always a pleasure.
God bless you, Sean. Thank you for that. We badly need it. We can cover one MOATS a week, but covering 2 MOATS a week is only possible if you support it. And the best way to support it, you can do it through the chat mechanism on YouTube, but the best way that we have found to support it, unless you're out there willing to sponsor the show, willing to advertise on the show, is through the Patreon. So it's patreon.com/George Galloway. And on Mondays in particular, I've got many hours on the train, and I have some cracking conversations with my patrons on the page. Direct, you to me, me to you. So there are many things, many reasons for supporting my Patreon page, but that's an additional one of them. Greg Fraser says, after all, his and Iran sacrificed for Hamas. Hamas stabs them in the back, giving glory to HTS or ISIS. Hamas are snakes. I'm done with Hamas. Well, many of you know the story, but I'll tell it again. In the 1970s, I asked President Arafat, Chairman Arafat as he then was, why are there no communists on the PLO Executive Committee? And he answered, I'm the communist representative on the PLO Executive Committee. And then 20 years or so later, I asked him, why were the Islamists not on the PLO Executive Committee? And he answered, I am the Islamist representative on the PLO Executive Committee. I reminded him of what he'd said 20 years before, and he laughed heartily, which was all he could do in the circumstances. But he went on to say, these Islamists are fighting for the liberation of Palestine, but if the day ever comes when the interests of Palestine become different to the interests of the Muslim Brotherhood, they will do what's in the interests of the Muslim Brotherhood. In other words, they don't actually believe in nationalism. They don't actually believe in national liberation. They don't actually care what the country is called. Their ideology, the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, coincides often with the rest of us. The opposition to the war in Iraq, for example, defense of Gaza, for example. Sure, we were on the same page then, but then we're not. Now we're not. And no one can credibly look at a map and say that the destruction of Syria and its replacement by this motley crew can possibly be in the interest of Palestine. I mean, literally nobody, unless you were a messianic who believed that this was all some divine plan and that the Syrian authorities that today are saying they do not want war with Israel, they want friendly, neighborly relations with Israel, are only kidding, and are going to build up all that military power that they just allowed Israel to destroy. Only if you were that kind of messianic could you conclude otherwise than that what's happened is a death blow to Palestinian resistance, not to the spirit of the people. You heard Miko Peled. They will find other ways, but they will not be armed ways. Nobody will be able to defend with arms any Israeli armed attack on them, because they won't have any arms. And the reason why they won't have any arms is because of the destruction of the land bridge from Iran to Palestine. If you can't see that, you are an idiot. An idiot. And 40 facts will not persuade you. Khalida is in Ottawa and wants to talk about terrorists on line 1. Khalida, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, George. We salute you doing what you are doing for the humanity and moral values. We salute you for your moral values, for justice, and for your standing up for the humanity. I am so much concerned with all this happening, regime changes in all over the world, Pakistan, Syria.
Just go ahead, Khalida. Turn your volume down on the television.
We are so concerned. They created disaster in Pakistan. They created disaster in Syria. They created disaster. And after they use these stupids, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and then they lose it. So we really appreciate that if you can talk about also Imran Khan and also about this issue that they are, and invite Alima Khan on your show, please. Thank you so much.
Well, we're doing everything that we can for Imran Khan. If you look back, you'll see week after week after week we have been raising this situation. You can count on us, dear Khalida, for that. And thank you for your kind words. Charlie is in North Wales, but wants to speak about Turkey. Go ahead, Charlie.
Evening, George. It's a good time to. Well, it's lovely to speak to you for the first time. You're old enough of an age like myself, where you'll remember Op Haven in northern Iraq, the Kurdish region. I was actually there, and I had my epiphany when I saw the absolute ingrained hatred of the Kurds by the Turks. But on the current situation, I can't see anything but a bloodbath. I mean, all these different factions just do not have a good track record of getting on with each other. They simply can't speak to each other. They have thousands of years of history going back, blood revenges, and it's all going to come out. The revenge will definitely come out, and they'll all go to war with each other. And Richard Medhurst was entirely correct. I think a deal was done some time ago behind closed doors with the Syrian army to just melt away. I'm convinced of that. This big project has been in the offing for years and years and years, and it's come to fruition. And I can't bear to witness it. I mean, humanity has lost its humanity. We as a species have lost our humanity because it's going to be an utter bloodbath for years. Another failed state. Well, it's not even a state now.
I mean, I can't bear to watch it either. Unfortunately, I have to speak about it, so I have to watch it. But I'd sooner walk away now. I kind of feel I've wasted my life in that regard. I spent basically the whole of my political life fighting for what's right in the Arab world, and it's all turned to ashes. So imagine how I feel. It's 50 years I've been in this struggle, and I feel now that those 50 years have been wasted. I hope I feel better in the morning. Charlie, thank you for that. Now, I do have another show on Tuesdays, 7 o'clock on Tuesdays, on YouTube. It's called Have It Out with Galloway, and you can be on it. Here's how. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, did you get that? It's haveitoutwithgalloway.com. And you can be on the show on the video screen right behind me, talking directly to me, putting your question to me and the big audience around the world. It's been fantastic tonight, the number of women callers. And Australia and Canada have been buzzing tonight, calling the MOATS. But I want to go to Oklahoma, where another lady called May wants to talk about Syria. May, welcome to the show.
Hi, George. I'm so privileged to talk to you. I just want to say hello to you and your listeners and your crew. Very few people ever mention your crew, and I know they work hard for us. In my opinion, it seems World War III has begun. Syria is further evidence that the U.S. government is devoid of humanity and morality, as if anyone doubted that. Please do not fall into despair. You inspire so many of us to help and to keep the ember of hope. You mentioned last time I called that sometimes you were embarrassed to beg for funds. But remember, you you are worth your salt. I doubt you were ever embarrassed to ask for your pay when you worked for others. Now you are still working for other people, but those people are your listeners and God, I believe. And you only got rid of the middleman. Again, much love to you, Gayatri, and your children. And by the way, I did join on Patreon, and I encourage all of your listeners that can to do the same, because we need you.
Wow, God bless you. Thank you, May. No, I will never give up. I have many other struggles to fight, and I'll go on fighting them. But I feel that that part of my life, fighting for the Arabs, with the Arabs, behind the Arabs, alongside them, I feel that that period has now ended. First, the destruction of Iraq, then the destruction of Syria has changed everything for me. So I'll probably begin focusing more on other places. I think the Arabs are a lost cause, frankly, at least for the time being. But thank you for the beautiful call. And the mention of Gayatri brings me to that part in the show that I love the best. What's rattling, Gayatri, on social media?
I also want to wake up out of this nightmare because it's getting worse by the day. But that phone call from May in Oklahoma, much obliged, May. I just wanted to make the same point that those 50 years and more that you have dedicated of your life for the cause, for Palestine, for the freedom and dignity of Palestine, of course, it's not lost, because indeed we have yet to face the judgment day.
Amen.
Amen. And of course, that's the reason why I married you, for this cause, the struggle. So Dr. Ray Higginson notes, T.E. Lawrence actually wrote that all men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake up in the day to find it was all vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with eyes open to make it possible. It would appear Lawrence of Arabia could have said this sometime over the past 2-3 days.
It's very interesting. I've been thinking, may I just ask through you, the viewers, did the Arabs make a mistake backing the British and the French in World War I? Should they have backed the Ottomans instead? I suppose that depends on whether the Ottoman-German side would then have triumphed. But they certainly didn't gain anything at all from joining the Allied cause in World War I. I don't have the level of scholarship to work that out.
Well, Ali A says the Arabs betrayed the Ottoman Empire and helped the colonialist USA and UK. So this is payback for Turkey. It's very sad for Palestine and the citizens of the country. The Arab leaders once again betrayed their people.
Oh, they're just a joke now. See, they're making pronouncements condemning Israel's seizure of Syrian land, having made it all possible. And these pronouncements are not worth the paper that they are now not written on. They're online. They don't even print them anymore.
Saves the money.
Yeah.
Well, I think that next week we should bring up a map to put this into picture, because Richard Medhurst is right. People should look at maps more often. Yeah. It will really make things more simpler. So we'll do that, and we'll show you it from the timeline from sykespicot to today. Staying on this point, Tahira Fazal says Muslims aren't united in good doings, while Western countries are very united in wrongdoings. Unfortunately, I had to read that one. So this all comes down to the question whether Syria will become a jihadi state. And obviously the majority answers yes, and you wonder who the no voters are. Well, some of them are not of the opinion it will become so. They are still of the opinion that there is freedom and diversity to be had in this new Syria management. But there's also people who just say, like Jai, he says, I don't think the West will allow a jihadi state next door to Israel. I think it's more likely to be annexed. It's true that ISIS never fired a bullet, but Israel, well, it doesn't mean that Israel will not fire a bullet at ISIS. They have now served their purpose.
Yeah, when we say a jihadi state, I don't think we mean one that's going to invade Israel. It's abundantly clear that they are not going to attack Israel, but they'll make a jihad against their own people.
Yeah.
Against their own women, against their own girls, against their own artifacts, their own architectural and cultural treasures, against their own religious minorities. Every church, every cross, every religious place that doesn't belong to their narrow stream. That's what we mean by a jihadi state.
Never mind Israel. Today, the leader of this HTS spoke with Sky News specifically about foreign countries. And he talks a lot about, don't worry about Syria, we'll be good, we'll be fine. But he mentions none. He doesn't even mention Israel. So Israel probably doesn't have to worry indeed. And Sean Thacker says, it is not in the interest of the cabal that it becomes a Somalia-type mess. Now, Somalia obviously is one of the 7 countries that General Wesley Clark mentioned in the big plan of the empire they wanted to attack and destroy. And then finally, Sean Babington says Syria will become at least as successful as Libya is after Muammar Gaddafi was brutally overthrown and murdered by the US. That's
a reassuring prospect.
I mean, look at these countries. Libya, there's not one government. There's not one clear...
There's 3 governments.
3 of them. Iraq, well, we don't even know. Who knows the leader of Iraq? Nobody. There's no strongman anymore there. So Afghanistan, well, the people who we were trying to fight are there. They're still there, back again. So with all the military, artillery and everything that the US
that
left.
Joe Biden left them. He left them the best equipped army in the world.
Exactly. So that is the best case scenario, right? That Syria will become a basket case. You know, for...
If you knew Syria as I know it, it's unthinkable, this. The Syrians are the highest nosed of all the Arabs. They really have a very high opinion of themselves. They're a highly cultured, highly educated, sophisticated people. They're not Afghan tribes. They're not Uyghurs, Uzbeks. They're none of these things. They regard themselves as a real cut above these kind of types. And they're going to be ruled by them now? They're going to decide what women wear, what women can do, with whom they can go out on the street. Is Syria going to become another Afghanistan? It's unbearable to me. I can hardly bring myself to say these words. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Go ahead, please, Gayatri.
No, my closing comment, statement. It's just that we are, meanwhile, at day 460 of the Gaza genocide, and another refugee camp has been attacked. So that, what it was all about, has gone a bit on the background, but they're still continuing bombing Gaza.
But it is what it was all about.
It is what it was all about. That's what kept us all united, wasn't it?
That united all right-thinking people in the world and all Muslims, as you said in your wonderful video. And that was shattered overnight. That unity has been destroyed.
But stay steadfast, please. I just want to close with some news of Floyd Mayweather. You know, that well-known Israel supporter came to London for some shopping. The boxer who came to London for shopping but was chased out. Don't come here. Don't come here with your supporting Israel, you know, cozying up with the with Israeli army, and then come to London to shop. No,
you're right. Our duty remains exactly the same, because we have to answer on the judgment day. What we did, not what other people did or didn't do, but what we did. So our duty remains the same, and will until our last breaths, and after us our children. So don't be in any doubt about my steadfastness. But I'm not going to put what time I've got left on the earth into a cause which has betrayed itself, has sold itself, destroyed itself, was an act of actual political suicide that was committed in Syria at the weekend. Thanks, Gayatri. Horiana is in New Zealand. My goodness. 2 calls from Australia and 1 from New Zealand, where I presume it's equally early in the morning. Horiana, welcome. Good morning.
Oh, it's a beautiful morning here, George Galloway. Me nui kia koe to you, George, and to your wonderful wife and your family. And that's a greeting in Māoridom. Mihi nui kia koe to the world, to the people that are listening on your show. What I would like to share, George, is it was a sad day for me to have heard the Syrian nation divided and also cast to the side to allow the cronies of the Western world elite get access to the Syrian resources and the oil-rich fields, because that's what it's all about, apart from Israel expanding its land. You know, George, you have said it correctly. It's the value in the world is family, irrespective of what the species is family, the security, the care and the love that we have in family.
Well, of course, you can say that it's the economy, stupid. But Syria doesn't actually, right at this moment, have an economy. Its oil industry has been stolen by the United States. Donald Trump said so very plainly. He said, we're there to steal the oil. He said it, the president. And the wheat, and between the United States and Turkey, they control the resource-rich parts of Syria. Syria had a massive tourist economy, which has disappeared to nothing. It had a massive religious tourism industry, which has disappeared to nothing. But it does have a share of the oil offshore, which it will share with Syria, Lebanon, Israel, the Palestine Authority, if it still exists, and with Cyprus. That Mediterranean basin now has a great deal of oil potential, but it's some years off actual production and revenue. So for the most part, for the first period, Syria is going to be an economic basket case, and you're going to have to pay for it. They will try and strong-arm the Gulf Arab countries to pay for it, but by and large, you'll be paying for it. And the American taxpayer has already stumped up. The British taxpayer stumped up yesterday, I think, the first of what will be a very long line of stumping up. Horiana, thank you for that. Kamar is in London on Israel and Egypt. Go ahead, Kamar.
Thank you very much, George, and thank you for one of the best mainstream political programs online. I'm half Egyptian, so I couldn't read and write Arabic. And what a lot of the political programs in the Middle East are now saying is that rather than Iran being the next target for Israel, it's actually Egypt, because Egypt now is the only country left close to Israel that has a significant military ability, including large number of troops, large number of weapons, and a large number of newish weaponry, like a lot of their planes from America. They've just signed a new contract with China to get some of their planes. So I just wanted to know your thoughts about Egypt being the next target for Israel rather than Iran.
Well, it's an interesting theory. I don't at this moment give it too much weight. It's true that Egypt is the greatest Arab country with the biggest population, with the biggest army, and as you say, with a decent amount of new equipment, retooled, repurposed. But there's no need to fight Egypt. Egypt is led by a slave government that is entirely in the hands of the United States. The Egyptian army is bought and paid for by the United States. So it's impossible for me to imagine that the current Egyptian government regime, why don't we call the government of Egypt a regime, but we call the government of al-Assad a regime, a very interesting point into which I've just fallen myself. The Egyptian regime is a client of the United States, and I cannot at this moment see any possibility that it will act as anything other than a client. And why turn on one of your own clients? There's simply no need to attack Egypt. Egypt attacked itself and unicized, I just tried to invent a new word there, made a eunuch of itself. There's no need to kick someone in the balls if they've already cut their own balls off. I think Iraq will be the next target. I'm actually sure that the ISIS Al-Qaeda mob will again cross the desert and invade Iraq. And that will be a means of further weakening Iran. And Iran is now much weaker than it was last week at this time. And Russia is, and China is, and Syria is dead. That counts as a bad week. Will Syria become a jihadi state? Yes or no? Well, on Telegram, 87% said yes. On X, where the NAFO and all these others are very active, it was 78% say yes. The community poll, 77% said yes, and on the stream, 80% said yes. So well over 3/4 of the audience believes that Syria will become a jihadi state. And indeed, a lot of people say, what do you mean will? It has become one. Now, I don't like misusing the word jihad. The word jihad is a noble and holy word. It means struggle, that's all. And in the religion of Islam, the primary jihad that you must fight is a jihad within yourself, against the evil inclination, against the evil intention. And if life is a struggle constantly between good and bad, good and evil, then you must jihad, you must struggle against evil. It's only in the last 25 years or so that this word has become more widely known, but it is an ancient Arabic and indeed Quranic term. So if I'd been writing that poll, I wouldn't have used the word jihadi, but I think our audience knows what we mean. Will Syria become a state where people get their heads cut off in public, their throats slit, their hearts eaten? Will the women be oppressed, suppressed, told what to do and what they can do, told what they can learn and told what they can wear, told how they must live? Will the girls be still allowed, as they did in the old Syria, in such profusion, to go to school and university and postgraduate education? Will the religious minorities be able to celebrate their religious obligations, their religious holidays? Will they be allowed to be themselves? Well, the signs are not good. Bashir, the putative president, though Golani is the power behind the throne, of course, already appeared in public in the presidency today, and he had two flags behind him. One was the new Syrian flag with 3 stars on it instead of 2, but the other was the Islamic flag. And given that that flag does not represent all of the people in Syria, it wasn't a great sign. I've got time for one more call because it is from Australia. Again, Imad in Australia on Syria for the last call of the night. Imad, welcome.
Thank you, George. The reason why we're up so early, number one, is to watch your show, and number two, it's summertime, so by 4 o'clock the sun's up and rising anyway, so that's why you're getting a lot of people up and about talking to you from Australia. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all the things that you've done in the Middle East and who you've stood up for in the Middle East. I'm a big fan of you since the day when you mopped the floor with Anna's head back in 2006 during the Hezbollah war against Israel. And going back to that day, when people forgot, when the Israelis were bombing Lebanon in 2006, they bombed all the bridges between Syria and Lebanon. When they did that, the people of Syria stated that if we can't get the weapons to Hezbollah over the bridges, we will put them on our shoulders and cross the border walking to drop them off to them. This was the alliance between Syria and Lebanon back then. What had happened since then, Turkey's been a big player in the region, as you know. He's been fighting from the north, trying to stop the central point between Iran and the resistance in the areas of Lebanon and Palestine, because Syria is the strategic point between Iran and the resistance to send arms, to connect to, and so on. Israel's always wanted that. They've always knew this is the point. This is the spot we have to destroy. And by doing this, we can then suffocate the Hezbollah and the Hamas, the resistance in Palestine, and force them out, as Israel's doing right now. They've now pushed in the Golan. They're now slowly starting to get that region of the Golan Heights. Netanyahu is praising this HTS group that's come in now for what they're doing in Syria. The US, Biden, has said we're happy to support the new government change in Syria. So when you've got these Zionist powerhouses coming in and saying that we're praising this new move to this man who was the right hand to al-Baghdadi during the ISIS invasion of Syria and Iraq, when you've got this man who's now going to represent the Syrian people, it's something that the Syrian people should understand that where their country's about to go to. Because I was just watching a program on CNN yesterday where there was a woman, the journalist, she was inside Assad's luxury car garage, as she said. And she was having an interview with this woman who had no hijab on, her makeup was like a woman on TikTok. And she said, look, we're very happy to invite these people into our country and reinstate the country and make it a better country. We're happy Assad's gone. She doesn't realise she's about to be fully covered by these jihadis that are coming into the country. But this is the thing that we're coming to now, George, the thing we're coming to, and I agree with you 100%. When you said before when you were talking to your wife about that, you feel like there's no more things to talk about or to support in the region anymore. You're looking at other things now because you can see yourself that the times are changing and the resistance in the region has taken a big blow. Everyone forgot about Gaza. No one's talking about Gaza anymore. The eye has been turned to Syria. Why? Because this is what the Western media wants. They want to shift everyone's eyes away from the Holocaust that's happening in Gaza and focus on the new strategic revolutionary front in Syria. Assad's gone, he's fled, now the country can be safe again. My question to yourself, if you could answer it, or anyone else, is this new HTS faction that's now taking over Syria, what's their next play? Is it going to switch towards Israel and help and liberate the Palestinians? Or, in my view, the way I'm thinking, someone was talking about Egypt before, no way, Egypt won't even open up the doors to Rafah. You think they're going to try and open up the doorway to help these people come over? That's not going to happen. I believe they're going to hit Iraq. This is my point. I believe the reason why they're going to hit Iraq, because Iraq has a strong faction that is Iranian-backed in the region, and now they're going to try and topple that in order to borderline with Iran to take out Iran, because ultimately Netanyahu and the US want to take out Iran for good. Taking out Syria, perfect strategic move for them, and they're slowly going to drift to the right. They're not coming anywhere near Gaza. Gaza's finished, and it's done. Anyway, your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that you are, sadly, absolutely correct in every particular, and you said it with an energy and a passion that has quite left me. So I won't try and repeat what you have said, but Gaza is finished. There is no doubt about that. It lies defenseless at the feet of Netanyahu, its remaining freedom fighters who have gallantly sought to defend their land and defend their people will soon run out of ammunition, long before they run out of courage. And in the end, the overwhelming force of the Zionist occupation will prevail. The only question is where the 2 millions will be put to. Will they be put to Egypt, which is the path of least resistance? They control the border. All they have to do is open the gate, and the starving and defenseless people will undoubtedly stream through it. You wouldn't even have to bust them out. Or whether they move them to Syria, where they now control substantial real estate, and they have a sympathetic government. I think there are probably some fighters in the HTS, and maybe more particularly in the other more radical, even more fanatic factions that mean it when they say we're coming to Jerusalem, and after Jerusalem we're coming to Mecca. I had a conversation with Piers Morgan about that on his show just the other day, if you haven't seen it yet. These people may exist, but the leadership now in Damascus has done a deal with the devil. And the devil is Israel. And the devil is Joe Biden. And they have done the deal. And that deal is we run Syria, and in return, we promise we will not lift a finger to help the Palestinians, and we will block anybody else who tries to do so across our territory. I'm glad we squeezed you in, Ahmad. It was a great call. Good morning to all in Australia and New Zealand. Happy summertime. We are not so fortunate here in Blighty the sun doesn't ever seem to rise these days in my country, but the knowledge and commitment of our audience on display again today from all over the world, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Britain. It's phenomenal. So I certainly haven't wasted my life building up the mother of all talk shows, thanks to you. 29,196 people voted in the poll. Not bad for a Wednesday. Well, I'll be back, God willing, on Sunday for the mother of all talk shows. I look forward to your company again then. And why don't you bring another viewer with you? Particularly those of you enjoying the summer down under, as we Westerners like to put it. See you. Good night.